Welcome everyone to my session on what's on in your Power BI environment. My name is Ásgeir Gunnarsson. I own a small consultancy called North Insights, one-man shop. I do lead the Icelandic PASS Group and the Icelandic Power BI user group. On this slide you have here, this is recording. It will be recorded, so you will have some different ways to get in contact with me. Please feel free to get in touch if you, if you want to connect, or if you want to talk data, or if you have any specific questions that you don't manage to get out in the during the session. So before we start, I just want to tell you that I'm at the hotel on hotel Wi-Fi, so hopefully it will be good. And I only have one screen as well, so hopefully there wouldn't be too much switching between things. So now that's out. So let's get on with it. So the agenda. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about why this topic, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of what I want to try to achieve over the next around an hour. I'm going to talk about a little bit about Power BI governance, and then how all this fits in with that, this monitoring of Power BI, why we're doing it, how does it fit, and what can we do with it. So that is what I want to try to achieve. A little bit first about why am I doing this? Why do I do a session on monitoring Power BI? And this comes a little bit from my experience as a Power BI admin. I used to work for a manufacturing company, a medium-sized manufacturing company. I was the first one to start using Power BI. Then they implemented Power BI, and then I was the Power BI person in the company. So I became a Power BI admin. And I think a lot of us that are Power BI admins, we are something what I like to call an accidental admin. It's a similar concept as we have often talked about it before about accidental DBAs. It is a person that you get handed the role. You're not really this is not really your primary role, but it's something you need to do, and then you start getting on with it. But it's not very easy to get the information. Not very handy to try to get to information about your environment. How is it set up? What are the settings, what do I have in my environment, who is doing what and all that. So there's nothing built in really nicely. And there are a bunch of good reasons, I had a very specific reason, for example, when I started doing this was that I needed to get information out to stakeholders. I needed to tell them, what were we doing, how was it going, I was securing funding. So it was very important for me to go do it. And also, if you're doing any kind of governance, I hope you're doing governance if you're doing Power BI, and most of my customers are not. They should be, and I'm trying to advocate that a lot. But if you're doing governance, monitoring is a big part of that as well. So that is a little bit, the background why I started, thinking about Power BI monitoring and why I decided to create a session to help others in a similar situation. So the objective of today is that I want to hope when we are done with the session, I hope you understand why you should be monitoring Power BI. I hope you understand what you should be monitoring in Power BI, and then also the how. So how do you get the data out? And I'm gonna end with we'll talk about automation, how you can then make automate the process of getting the data out, and then also something about reporting on it. I'm going to show you an example of a report that I've made from the data. But there are, of course, endless possibilities depending a lot on what you are trying to achieve. When I talk about Power BI governance, I like to put it into 4 boxes. I like to have 4 different pillars of, in the governance strategy, and they are processes, how you should be doing things and how people should be doing development and storing data and all these different things. Training, because the better, the trained your people are, the less likely they are to break, break governance or do something that they shouldn't be doing. Monitoring, which is what we're going to talk today, and then roles, which is what kind of defined roles do you have in your Power BI implementation that help people to understand who is doing what. But we are going to be focusing on the monitoring part. So that's the only slice we are going to take from the governance. If you want to know more about Power BI governance, there are great white papers out there, and there's good ways to find out information about this. Everyone does governance differently, but this is just my way of doing governance. I have on my blog, blog.northinsights.com, I have an article also on Power BI governance if you want to read more about it. So before I start going into Power BI generally, I just want to get Power BI Report Server over, because that's That's also part of the Power BI environment or Power BI ecosystem. And the Power BI report server, it's very simple when it comes to monitoring. It is underneath the hood is basically the same as reporting services, so SQL Server reporting services, meaning that it will be monitored in exactly the same way. It's simple and accessible. It's only a one table or a view. You should be using the view according to Microsoft in the report server. It's called execution log 3. Everything you need is in there. There's a lot of information online about it. You need to be aware of that, there are some things that are not populated in the execution log 3 for Power BI reports that are populated for reporting services reports. There's nothing you can do about it. The information is not anywhere else, so you simply have to live with it. And of course, we should all be hassling. We need to be asking Microsoft to add those things, but at the moment they aren't. An example of those, there are the when you run reporting service report, you can go to the database and see how long did it take to run the query, how long did it time to take the render of the report, and different. So you have 3 different things you can see. But for Power BI, you will only see the total time because they haven't implemented that for the Power BI reports. So there's also some new categories that are not very well documented, but if you look at it, you will figure out very fast what they are. So since that's so simple, I'm not going to go anywhere else with that. It's just what it is. Power BI report server is in the execution log 3. So if we now talk about PowerBI.com or Power BI services, which is where we're going to focus our time, I like to section the monitoring into 3 different sections. So first of all, it's the Power BI admin settings, which is a manual monitoring. Second is the Power BI artifact inventory, which is where we collect information about what we have. Then there are Power BI activities, which is what people are doing, and then it's Power BI capacity, which you can monitor what's going on in your capacity if you have Power BI Premium or if you have Power BI Embedded. So these are the 4 sections, and I'm going to spend some time on each one of them, and then we're going to come back and hopefully we will have learned everything we need to know about these things. So why would you be doing this? So what can you use the data for? First of all, you can use the data for better insights. So what is going on in your environment is not only relevant if you need to prove something. It's also just very important that you know what's going on in your environment as an administrator, just so you have an idea of is your environment stressed, or how many users do you have? How widespread is is it in your company, and what data is being used, and what data sources, and different things like that. One of my favorite things to use this data for, which is not something that many people are doing, far too few in my mind, is to support your adoption and implementation. So who is using Power BI? What departments are using Power BI? How many people are actively using it? You can use all this information to secure better funding, to tell pat people on the back for doing good implementation and adoption. And there's all kind of different ways you can use this, just to not in a governance perspective, but more in an implementation perspective. Of course, governance is a huge part of why we do monitoring, because we often need to make sure that people are doing what they should be doing, or more they are not doing what they shouldn't be doing, and sometimes we even need to prove that. And the last part of what I have been using this data for is licensing maintenance. So this is particularly when people have a license and are not using it, because Power BI is a subscription model. People can licenses can be transferred from one person to another. So if you have given people Power BI Pro licenses and they are not using it, you can transfer that license to someone else. Just make sure that they are not one of those users that only need Power BI every 6 months. Then you want to make sure what type of user they are before you do that. Another thing you can do with license maintenance within with the monitoring part here is that if someone signs up for a trial license for Power BI, they will get a 3 month trial, or I think maybe it's a month now, but at least they get a trial license. And if you if you don't give them a proper license before it runs, they will just of course lose their access, and then you will need to it will make them unhappy if that happens. What you can do is you can see in the audit log what, when they did sign up for a trial license, and you can make sure that you hand them a license before it runs out if you think that's the right thing to do. But at least you're aware of that people are running out of trial licenses, and you will see when they, you can make an informed decision of, if they need a license or not. Okay, that's what we can do with the data. So monitoring is a big part of governance. You need to, so this is a little recap. You need to understand what's going on in the environment. Sometimes you need to prove or disprove certain events. Note that, if you need to prove something or disprove something, if you're not collecting the data, you will not be able to do that. That's for certain. And then you can use it to document your implementations. Okay, now let's dive a little bit into certain things of it. So first, one thing I want to talk about is the settings. This is a topic that often gets overlooked. But in the Power BI admin portal, there are a bunch of settings that are set that makes basically rules about how your environment works. The biggest part of it is the tenant settings. And in the tenant settings, there are a bunch of different things that you can set. For example, can people publish to web? Can people share externally? And there's all kind of different things you can set there. And there are settings that you actually, in my opinion, you should modify. Publish to web is one of them. You should go in there and you should make sure that only authorized people can publish to web. And in my mind, again, you need to go in there and and enable the audit logs so that they get collected. If you don't go in there and do it, they don't get collected. And there are other settings that you might want to modify. Can people export? Can people share outside the company? Can people push app to end users? And there's other different things in there. So I just want to jump over to Power BI just to show you a little how it works. Let me close this down here. I was just promoting it on Twitter. So here I'm in the Power BI portal. I'm going to go and go to the admin portal. I am an Power BI administrator in this tenant, so I have access to the admin portal. Oh, no, I'm not. I am logged into the wrong account. Sorry about this. That was not very good way to do this. How do I? Oh, I was not going to do that. Sorry, I was in the wrong part. Sign out. That was a little embarrassing. So I'm going to log into my administrator account. Sorry about this. Like all good administrator, I have a separate account for my administration. Did I not? Yeah, I did. Why am I not getting? There it is, admin portal. So now you can see. I don't know if you noticed. I was maybe a little fast, but when I was logged in as a non-administrator, I got the capacity settings refresh summary. That was the only things I got, because you might be able to see something. You might be a capacity admin even though you're not a Power BI admin. The account I had before was not a capacity admin, so it would just not be able to do anything. But you always see these things here. So you have a different things in here. So you have the usage metric, which is the first one, which should show me information about what my environment is, how many users I have, and what they have been doing. So a little preview of the activity log. I'm not sure why it's not populating, probably because of my bad internet. Another thing is here is the audit log, as I talked about before. We're going to talk about that later. You can turn it on. I have turned it on. That's why I have this option here. Like I said, the most important thing is the tenant settings. And they are a bunch of them. I think there's something like around 40 right now. They get, they add new things to their Microsoft all the time. And some of them are pretty overlooked. Some of them are really, everyone knows about, publish to web. You should be, closing down that, or at least in having very authorized users, sharing outside of your company, external sharing, and all these different things people know about. There are a bunch of other things in here that are really relevant and really good things that you should be doing. One of the things that I think is something that all companies should look into, at least, is the publish get help information. So basically you can, if you want, you can turn this on, and if you do that, you can put out internal URLs for documentation, discussion forums, licensing request, and help desk, and people then can access that when they need help. They can go to the question mark up here in the right corner, and then they will get your internal pages instead of getting the external pages, which is like Microsoft Forms and stuff like that. So this is a really good setting here. Otherwise, that you first just need to go through them. And what my experience tells me is that these things, the settings you put here, they are they're pretty hard to monitor, except if you want to just do it manually. So if I do change something here, it will say in the audit log that I did change it. What it will not say what I changed it from. It will only tell me what I changed it to. So what my advice to all of you is that you take down every single setting in here. You will document it and say that workspace settings, create workspaces, that's enabled for entire organization. You write that down, that this is how it should be. And you go through every single setting in here and you write it down and have a document that would describe that. Because if you have multiple administrators and one of them goes in and changes something here, if you don't know what it should be, you only know that it was changed, but you don't know what it was changed from. So have it documented, make sure that this is actually monitored. You can either do it by saying that a person needs to go in here every month and just go through it all to see if it if it works or if it is as it should be, or you can monitor the audit log, saying that if anything changes, someone gets notified and they will then compare it, the value that it's been changed to what it should be. But again, if you don't write it down, nobody will know. And the same goes for the rest of it, of course. You want to make sure that the embed codes, which is often the publish to web, even though if you turn publish to web off, the embed codes that are already exist, they will be disabled. But if you have it enabled, you can go in here and you can see who has published to web and what did they publish to web, and you can look at the report, etc. And then there's organizational visual, data flow settings, all these different things here that I'm not going to go through all of them. Just I recommend that you go through each one of them, and the ones that you feel matter for your organization, you should document those and make sure that you monitor that they don't get changed without just cause. Okay, so that was a little bit about the Power BI admin portal and the manual monitoring. And that, like I say, you can automate the actual monitoring, but you cannot automate the documentation of it, which I think you should definitely do. Okay, so that was the first part of it. That's the admin portal and the other settings in the Power BI, the Power BI admin portal. So the next part I want to talk about is the Power BI artifact inventory. A Power BI artifact inventory is basically where you query Power BI to ask Power BI, what do we have? So how many reports do we have? What are they called? Who owns them? Workspaces, all these different things that you need to go and monitor to get access to it. And why would you want to do this? Well, there are a couple of things reasons why you want to do this. First of all, it's really good to just know what you have. Second of all, you can use this, especially if you query the data and you put it into a database or files or something that you then, you can see how things are changing over time. How many reports did I have last week or last month, and how many do I have now? And if you see any kind of a trend in it, it's growing fast or it's shrinking fast or something is going on, you might need to act on it. For example, if you have a Power BI Premium capacity and your inventory is growing fast, you might need to consider buying more capacity or switching things out of capacity if you want to do dual capacity and shared capacity and premium capacity as well. And another thing you want to do is you can use this data, as I talked about in the beginning. You can use this data to let's say advertise what's going on. You can tell people that you are actually something is happening here. Implementation is going well. We have your user base has grown over the last 6 months. So using this to secure more funding or just to tell people how it's going on. Another thing that I have been doing recently with this artifact inventory, which I think is a really, really good way to use it, is to simply create a proper inventory in a report, for example, a Power BI report, and make that Power BI report accessible to everyone in your organization. People then can browse the inventory and they can say, okay, I can see there is a report here that interests me, and I can see it's owned by this person or this department or whatever you want to put on there, and then they can request access to it, or they can, inquire if it's, if it's relevant for them. So you can do this, automatically, or you can do it manually, no matter what you do. Because the problem with Power BI, a little bit of a problem with Power BI, is that if you haven't been given explicit access to a report or a workspace or an app, you won't see it. So you have no idea what is in the tenant unless you have been given explicit access. By opening up the inventory and making it accessible to everyone, you allow people to see what exists, so they don't recreate it themselves, or they can then just request access to something that might make their job easier, but they didn't know it existed. So I highly encourage you to do the Power BI artifact inventory. If you want to do it, you will need to use the Power BI REST API. I should have opened this, so let me just, I'm going to ping this, sorry. So the Power BI REST API is where you can go and get this information. Of course, you can go in manually and look at everything, but even though you're a Power BI administrator, going into the Power BI portal, I can only see workspaces that I have given explicit access to. So I don't see anything that it is not, I haven't been given explicit access to in the portal here. But as a Power BI admin, I can query the REST API and get all the workspaces and all the reports and all the dashboards that exist within my tenant. But the Power BI REST API is maybe not so as accessible as you would like. The main problem I think with it is that it comes in, it has a different types of endpoints, and it looks like they're made by different teams within Microsoft. So the one you want to be looking mostly about is the admin part of the REST API, because if you query the admin part of the REST API, you will get everything. So you will get everything that that is in it, if as long as you're a Power BI administrator. So for example, you have a endpoint called get groups as admin. It will returns a list of workspaces for the organization. So every single workspace that is in the organization. While you have also a groups endpoint, and if I say here get groups, it returns a list of grouped workspaces the user has access to. So this will only get the ones that you have been explicitly given access to. And unfortunately, there are some things that exist in the admin API, and there are some things that don't exist in it. And apps is one of those. Apps is a endpoint that doesn't exist in the admin in our API. So they actually have taking this one here, and now, it has actually, now it can get everything. It used to only be able to get everything that you had access to. Nice. So this is one of the most wonderful things about Power BI. It changes all the time. It makes these sessions like this very, it makes me sometimes do things that are wrong, which I love. I love to be proven wrong when I'm telling something that it's not something that works well. But there are other things, most of these here down here, they will only return you the things that you have explicit access to, while the admin API will give you access to everything. Okay, so now you know the API exists. You probably did before. Now you know there's there's admin endpoints, so there's non-admin endpoints, and you can see that how they look. So for example, this one here, which is a classic one, get groups as admin. It's called groups because Power BI workspaces used to be Office 365 groups. So they used to be that, but the modern Power BI workspaces are called workspaces, while the other ones are called groups. The API endpoint is still called groups. It's just too hard to change, and I totally agree with that from Microsoft. The documentation here is actually pretty good. It will tell you that this is the endpoint here. It will tell you what the URL for the endpoint is, and it will give you examples of what does it return and what kind of arguments can you deliver with it. So top and filter and all these different things. it will then give you an example of what you will get in response if you call it. So the response you will get to the API is a JSON. And then you need to, of course, parse that JSON to do something about it. But that's, there are plenty of tools out there that can do it. So if you want to call the API endpoint, you of course need to figure out how do you want to do it. So there are different ways you can do it. You can you can build your own web application that can do it. That is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to use PowerShell. I use PowerShell myself, but that's not the only way. There are plenty of other things that you can do it. The Azure Data Factory can call APIs, and there are different, different ways to do that. You just have to figure out what way fits you and your company, and then you need to figure out, of course, how to call it, and then how to parse the response you get. Microsoft have done some work in PowerShell to allow you to call those API endpoints without needing to know the JSON and without needing to actually call the REST API endpoint. So they have encapsulated some of the endpoints with the PowerShell commandlets. The problem with those, there are quite a few, and I really do like them. The problem with them is that when the API endpoint changes, the encapsulation needs to be changed as well. So you need to figure out if you want to use the encapsulation or the commandlets in PowerShell, if you want to go down that route, or if you want to do call the API directly. Luckily for us who use PowerShell, Microsoft have also created a commandlet that encapsulates the act of calling a REST API endpoint. So there's a commandlet that allows us to call the endpoint with simply giving it a URL, and it will encapsulate all that that happens within that. There's one of the things that can make this difficult when you're using when you're calling these REST APIs is that a group or a workspace, it has for example a report, but it also has the dashboards, it has users, it has data sets, and it has different objects within it. So when you're calling all these different things, if you want to chain them together, because that's what you really want to do, you want to get a lineage, or you want to be able to say that what report belong to this workspace, what data sets belong to this workspace, what data sources belong to the data set that belongs to the workspace. And if you want to do something like that, you will either need to loop, so call all the workspaces, and then for each workspace call all the reports. So most of the API endpoints have give me all the reports in a specific workspace. Give me all the data dashboards in a specific workspace. But Microsoft have around a year ago or something like that, they did an add-on to this particular endpoint, which is getting all the workspaces, and they added this expand attribute. And these expand attributes allow you to get all the related entities inline, so you can get a list of users, reports, dashboards, dataset, data flows, and workbooks. And workbooks is actually something that is fairly new. So if you are using this already, don't sit on your laurels, because things do change in this, and they're not very well advertised that things change. So sometimes things will just show up. And say if you use the commandlets, you have to, you will have to do this yourself. If you use the endpoint directly, you can actually add this expand on it to get all these different things. So let's look at an example. So let me go to here. I am here in PowerShell, and I'm gonna show you little bit of different commandlets and show how they work and what they will do. So let me go. Sorry, oh, that was the wrong one. I have, as a good TV cook has, I have prepared some commands that I want to show you. So first one is a commandlet where Microsoft have gone and encapsulated the get. So the REST API endpoint we were just looking about before. They have encapsulated that within a commandlet which is called get Power BI Workspace. So you don't have to call the endpoint. You don't have to know anything about endpoint. You simply call get Power BI Workspace. You will need to, you don't have to, but if you give it a scope organization, it will give you everything. If you don't give it a scope organization, it will only give you things that you have access to. And of course, it will only work with the organizational scope if you're a Power BI admin. And when I run it, it will just run through all my workspaces, and it will just output them into the window. And what you will see is that they are actually it is a very nice output. It is a table output, which is something I really like. I really like tables because tables are very easily understandable. It will tell me what the ID is, what the name is, and this is a personal group, meaning it is my workspace. It's active, and there's different things. This one won't show you the actual user principal names of people who have access to the workspace. But if you run the if you run it, and output it, run it as a, directly against the API endpoint and output it to something, you will get the actual people who have access to the workspace. So if I scroll a little bit up here, yes, I want to show you a little bit. So here, for example, you will see that there's something of a type group, and a type group means that this is the old type of workspaces. So the V1 workspaces. And if I go a little bit further up here, I will see this is of type workspace, meaning it's the V2 workspace. And this one is actually on a capacity, so it will tell me the capacity ID as well. So this is really nice. It will give me a nice structured information. I can output this to a CSV file, to a SQL database, or whatever your PowerShell magic will allow you to do. You can create a PowerShell script that can do all these different things. The same thing can be called with a REST API directly. So if I go and we'll get this one here. So instead of if I calling the commandlet, I'm going to call the REST API directly. So here I have I'm using the commandlet that Microsoft created, which is called invoke Power BI REST method. Basically, it will allow me to call the REST API endpoint without having to do any work around how to call it. I just need to supply a URL, and then the method here encapsulated all the complexity around it. Of course, I forgot to add. I am already logged in. That's why I can do this. If you're not logged in, you will need to log in either by supplying PowerShell with your credentials, or I just did use the login Power BI commandlet, which will pop up and allow me to log in. If you want to do this unattended, you can do that with unattended account. There's a bunch of information about that online about authentication, and because I'm just showing you a little bit around, I have just logged in interactively. So if I do this, it's the same thing as I did before. It's just getting all the groups, and I am. I only want those who are deleted. So only give me those, so I can, when I do the call the API, I can actually put in filters, and I can do all kind of, neat stuff with it. So if I run this, I only deleted workspace, and now it will return with me a deleted, I have 3 deleted workspaces, and will give me all those 3 workspaces. You will see that there is a part of it. This is a JSON document, so they will tell you about the document itself, and then I have 3 different workspaces that are deleted. It will tell me what about it, and it will tell me the state here is deleted. I don't know why I don't get the scroll of my. Let me just go and do it like this. It doesn't allow me to scroll, so it will tell me the state is deleted, and then what the name of it is called and all these different things. If you are not comfortable with handling JSON, you can use the commandlet. If you're comfortable with handling JSON, you will get more flexibility by doing that. So let me show you another one where I will go a little bit further here. Yes, so I'm going to do this one here next. I'm going to do this one here. So this one is the only difference here is that I am calling the same REST API endpoint, but instead of filtering on only deleted, I'm simply saying give me the workspaces and expand the reports and dashboards. So give me all the workspaces and their reports and their dashboards. If I run this, I will get now longer list because now I'm asking for all the different ones. So I'm just going to scroll a bit up here just to show you the first one. So when you see this now, you will see that, first of all, of course, it's just about the JSON, and then it will say, okay, the ID of the workspace is this, and information about the workspace is the first part of it. Then it will say, okay, within that workspace, now we have the reports, and these are all the reports that are in the workspace. And then I will have all the dashboards that are in the workspace, and they will be here. And I could have expanded the users and the data flows and the data sets. And the workbooks as well. So I could have gotten that. So the complexity becomes a little bit deeper now, because now you have you're too deep now. Not too deep, but 1-2 deep in here. So you have a workspace, and that belonging to that are reports. And you need to be able to, of course, work with that. If you, for example, when I try to just output this to a CSV file, I couldn't make PowerShell, do that properly, but that's because I'm not very good at PowerShell. You might be able to do it. So what I have done instead is that I output this to a JSON file, and then I will pass the JSON file with a tool that knows how to work with, X deep JSONs, and that works really, really well. And as I said before, if you decide to go against the REST API directly with the endpoints like this, you will get all the flexibility. Now, one thing you need to be aware of when you do this is that things do change. For example, I was approached by a customer, I think a couple of weeks ago or last week maybe, and they asked me, can I, using the REST API, can I get all the reports and who owns them? And I went to, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe I will check that out. Let me just check that out. So I went to here, to get reports as admin, and I looked at this and say, okay, what is the response I get? I will get the dataset ID, the name, and the URL, URI, and then the embed URL. And I said, okay, it doesn't look like you get the owner of the report. You just simply get these things, So I don't think you can do it. And then I sent that email, I answered him, and then I said, okay, better check my data. And then I opened my the output of my report endpoint, which I'm calling report as an admin. And then I'll see, okay, now there's actually more than that, And if you look at my data here, you will see that, this is, just what I told about before. Oh, sorry. What I talked about before is that, it has the dataset ID and it will end there. But then all of a sudden, something more starts to happen. So at some point, this changed. So now for any newer reports I have a modified date time, I have a modified by, if it has been modified. Or I will have, if I go to this one here, it has created by as well. Oh, damn it. Which will tell you who created it. And I will also have who modified it. So if that's two different people, or if it's the same person, I will get that here. So this is something that just changed. It's not documented, even though the API is really well documented. It's not really in there that this is the output. So you will have to be aware of that something like this can happen. It usually won't do any harm, but it makes it even more important that if you are outputting files, or if you're outputting this to a database or whatever you're doing, that you actually keep the original. So don't delete the file. So don't put it into a database without checking what columns are in there first. Because if I had just been outputting this into a database without checking the columns, I would have missed all these different columns. So I wouldn't have known who was modified by 2 weeks ago and who is modified by now. But since I keep all this, I can then compare those two, if that is of interest to me. So what I do, I output this all to JSON files, and I keep the original files, and then I will rerun it if I need to. Okay, so that was a little bit about that. I have some other things in here, so if you're interested, but that's not I don't want to spend too much time on just looking at different calls. Like I say, I use PowerShell. If you want to use something else, it's fine. You just simply need to be aware of how it works. That was the Power BI artifact inventory. That was one of the bigger ones. This is something that I advocate a lot for, that people actually do this. But the one that people really want to do, and really and it's the most important one to do, of course, is the activities. So you can collect the activities. Power BI has an activity log or an audit log, depending on where you're looking. It has actually two names in two different places. In it, you will be able to find information about, who is using Power BI. And, I have actually been approached by a customer asking me who is not using Power BI, because there were people who should be using it. But, we had to ask, they were saying, okay, are they actually using it or not? And that is also something that you can do. You can find individuals, who is viewing something, who is modifying or deleting, which is usually what you're interested in from a governance perspective, but also viewing is really important there. Also what, combining these data together, your artifact inventory into what is being used, you will be able to enrich your data. So enrich your inventory data with the usage, who is using it, how often are they using it, when are they using it, what time of day, for example, or what days of week, or days of month are they using it. And then things like when something last accessed, accessed by whom, and what data sources are being used. So all this different information is something that you can get from the audit log. Now there are two ways you can access the audit log. One of them is by going to the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center. You will most likely not have access to it. Now, this is my demo tenant. This is my own tenant, so I have all the access I need. But in many cases, Power BI administrator will not be an Office 365 administrator. And to be able to access these audit log in Office 365, or Microsoft 365 as it's called now, well, it says Office 365 here. It's fun, it says Microsoft 365 here. If you want to access this, you either need to be a Office 365 admin, or you can need to be a Office 365 auditor, which is a standard role. Or you can, of course, the Office 365 admin can create a custom role that will give you access to this. The main drawback or main problem with having access to this is that there is no way for the administrator to give you access to only Power BI. So if you look here, you will see that there's folder activities, SharePoint list activities, sharing and access request activities. There's all kind of things in here that a Power BI admin has no reason to be looking at. But since they can only give you access to the audit log or not, they will either, they don't need to make that decision. If you get access to here, it has a bunch of different things in here. So the Power BI has its own section in here, Power BI activities. It has a bunch of viewing, editing, deleted, printed, all these different things. So there's a lot of different things in here. When I actually looked at this very first time, many moons ago, it had something like 35 activities. I think now there are probably hundreds at least. And if you look at the bottom of those activities, new things in here. So sensitivity labels, the new, what are they here? So the new, what are they called? This is completely stolen from me. Yeah, doesn't matter. So there's all these new things comes, at the bottom here, and you will need to, be aware of that. At least, they get more and more things in here all the time. But it doesn't really matter if because you should be collecting it all. There of course could be an argument for that you should only be, collecting the data that you actually need. Who deleted something, who changed something. But since when it comes to auditing and governance, you don't really know beforehand what you will need. So I will argue that you will need to take cover it all. So the data is kept here for 90 days. If you haven't, when it comes to day 91, the first day gets erased and 91 gets written. So it's like a running window of 90 daze. If you want to keep it longer, you can, but you will need to buy an extra Office 365 license. And I've never met anyone who's doing that, but there is a possibility that you can actually store this longer than 90 days if you pay more money. What I recommend instead is that you export this you keep it in a database or wherever you want to keep what makes sense to you, or in a data lake or files or whatever. But you will actually collect this so that you can go further back in time than 90 days. If you don't do that, of course, you will be limited to the 90 days, but you can always go in here and find something. So if I want, I can go and then I can find a particular activity and I can click on it, and I can then say I can look view Power BI report. Here it is. I can choose that, and then I want to choose that, and I will say search here, and it should then show me that this person, which is me, you will view the Power BI report, and I can click on it, and the report was called AI Show, and that's basically what you get from here. You can see the IP address. I will get more information on this if I will export this, and I can go here and export the results, but that's a manual thing. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be getting it out. Office 365 has an API, so similar to the one we looked at before. It's just Office 365 instead of being a Power BI API, and that will allow you to get the data out. But as I say, you need to have all that access that I talked about before, either being a Office 365 admin or being a Office 365 auditor. Power BI, the Microsoft have implemented this similar thing into the Power BI admin API. So if you don't have access to the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center, you will be able to get this, if you're a Power BI admin from the Power BI admin API. It is basically a copy that Microsoft have made. They have taken data from the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center and put them, and make them accessible through the API. You will of course need to be admin to get them. The drawback about this is that this will only store data for 30 days. So it will only give you the last 30 days, not the full 90 days. So if you are in a situation that you're starting your monitoring right now, I would suggest that you try to convince your Office 365 admins to get you the whole history of the 90 days, and then you can get the rest from this API endpoint. So you don't have to really, you don't have to start with only 30 days. You will get the full 90 days. And then, of course, you will just export it, put it into a database. It is a similar process that you do with the rest of it. You either build a web application or something that you do, or you use PowerShell like I'm doing, and then you can go on and get it. So I'm just gonna go on and show you a little bit. There are a couple of things you need to be aware of when you do this. So if you are getting it from the Office 365 API for the whole 90 days there, you can ask for a period of time. So you can say to Office 365, I want to get these whole 90 days, but you will only get 5,000 responses. So if you have more than 5,000, you will need to page through them all. With the Microsoft admin API endpoint, you can only get 1 day at a time. So you will need to do something like this. I'm using the PowerShell commandlet that has been used to encapsulate the REST endpoint. You can of course use the REST endpoint if you want. And this one will only give you a whole day. So you need to supply it with a start time and an end time, and they cannot be over more than 1 day. So here I'm actually saying, give me all the events of the 2nd of June, from midnight 2nd of June until 1 minute to midnight 2nd of June the day before. You can put this into milliseconds if you want. So I'm only down to seconds. But if you want to be cover better, you can go down to milliseconds, which should cover it pretty well the day itself. You want to be very, very sure that you don't duplicate data. So you want to take a whole day at a time and only close days. And when you do, you will get these different things. You get the ID, record type, what operations. This one, called the operation get groups as admin. So I actually called the API that is logged that I did that, and then what user it was, and what IP I had, and everything that. So there's different things that that are in for this particular day. Okay, so you should collect it. You should, in my mind, you if you haven't started yet, go and get those 90 days, beg your Office 365 admins to give it to you, even though they just export it to CSV, so you get the older data, and then you can cover the rest yourself from PowerShell or from your web application or something, where you will call the admin endpoint. There's not much to say about it other, except that collect it, and make sure you have it so that you can then use it. If you have Power BI Premium, and I just wanna add this because it's a little bit different than the rest. If you have Power BI Premium, you can, of course, with the REST API, get the what capacities exist through the capacity endpoint, but Power BI also have a capacity pattern analysis app. So if you go to Power BI, show you go to Power BI, and if you go to apps, you can install a Power BI Premium Capacity app. You can simply get it by going to Get More Apps from Microsoft App Source, and instead of having only organizational, you just go to All, and then you can search for it, and then you can install it. And when you have installed it, it will tell you everything you need to know about your capacities, all kind of different information about the performance of them. So just this is not some a brand new thing actually in this is that you can get it as a template app as well. And if you get it as a template app, you will have access to the data underneath, meaning that you can build your own reports on top of it as well. That could actually be very useful if you want to monitor your Power BI Premium capacities in your own way, not exactly how Microsoft does it. So I encourage you to take a look at that. I just want to mention it because it's a little bit different place than the rest of it. Of course, everything you do in a premium capacity is logged in the audit log, but not the actual performance of the capacity itself. Okay, so I have been doing this for a while, and I decided to create create this as a pattern, or this is the way I do it if I need to get the data out. So I have basically a cloud pattern on the top and an on-premise pattern on the below. Both of them work. Whatever fits you. You should just do it. Basically, you will need to get the REST API data to get the activity, to get the inventory, get the activity log. I'm using PowerShell. Like say, if you want to use something else, you can do that. I'm running my PowerShell through Azure Function app. I found that to be really useful and really easy to get to work. I use Azure Blob Storage to store the JSON files. Of course, if you're on premise, you can just put it into whatever local storage you have. And I will use the Azure Data Factory to process the data, to actually take all those JSON files and parse them, put them into our database, and then archive those I have already gone through. And then I use some logic within my SQL to make the data nice, and then I will use Power BI to report on it. So it's a very typical pattern. It just takes a little time to set up, of course, but it works really well. And if I just jump over a little bit, I can show you a little bit how it works. So first, if I start with my function apps, so I have function app in Azure. I've created a function per endpoint in the REST API. So I have my data sets and my data flows, my dashboards, capacities, all these different things. I also take information about the users from my Azure Active Directory, because then I can chain the actual user to the activity. So for example, if I show you this again, this is all my reports. They are created by this is just an ID for the user. You need to get the actual username from the Azure Active Directory. And then each function is basically a PowerShell that I call, and then it just runs on schedule within the function app. It's really nice, works really well. It's very lightweight, and I'm pretty happy with how it works. Hopefully it will load so you can see it a little bit. That would be typical if it doesn't. There it is, and it's basically I have my my username and password in Key Vault. And I'm calling the Key Vault to get the username and password, and then I'm simply calling the REST API to get the data out. So I'm calling the data set from the admin part, and I'm just going to go in and I'm putting it out to a JSON file. Now, there's one thing you need to be aware of if you're going to use Azure Data Factory. Sorry, if you're using Azure Data Factory to parse the JSON file, that the JSON file you get out. This is an example of a JSON file you get out. Oh, this is not. Sorry about that. Let me go back to this. So yeah, so here is the example of the JSON. Sorry about this. I just want to scroll up to the top of it. So what you will get is that remember I told you about this is the information about the JSON. If you try to to consume this within Azure Data Factory, it will tell you that it doesn't like it. It will it will bulk on it because it doesn't like the @ sign in here. It just it won't like it. There might be some ways out of it in Azure Data Factory. I didn't find it, so I'm using in my PowerShell here. I will actually get the content of the file and I will delete the @ sign and then save the file again, because then my Azure Data Factory doesn't mind it, and the JSON file is fine structured and works well and everything. Then I have a Azure Data Factory, as I said before. I have 10 pipelines. 9 of them are real pipelines, and then I have a master that will call them all. And I simply have pipelines that will call my workspaces, my reports, my refreshes, and on and so forth. And each one of them are pretty much the same. I will just call get the metadata about my JSON files. I will truncate my staging, and then I will look through all the JSON files. I will parse them, put it into a database, and then I will I will archive them, and then I have a store procedure here in the end, which will take the data and it will shape the data in the correct one and move it from staging over to another database, another table. And then when it's done that, it's basically a SQL database. It's pretty simple. I have a SQL database that has come on, cover it. That has all the tables. It has staging tables, and then just production tables or whatever you want to call them for each and every one of these. This has all the inventory and all the activities in it as well. And then I have a Power BI report on top of it. And this Power BI report, of course, I don't have a lot of activity in my tenant, so this is going to be pretty empty. But it still has the hopefully shows you the idea. I simply have first an overview page where I will say that I have 15 users, but only in the last 3 months, which I have selected here, I only have 9 active users of those 15. The same goes for reports and dashboards. So this is something you can do also as well. If you want to, so I have 71 reports, but I only have 28 that has been accessed in the last 3 months. Maybe I could clear some of them out. And I will, the top active workspaces, active, users, how many users are active by date. And then how many the top reports that I have been used. So this is basically just like an overview of what's going on, and then I will go down to the user activity, and here I will be able to see that I want to see everyone that did some specific activity, everyone that did an import. An import is when you publish from Power BI Desktop to Power BI Service. That's called an import. Here I will see what were the workspaces called, what is who did it, the client activity, and all this different information about it. And I will see that I did most of it, and my friends in Liverpool, that will make Mark happy. All my users are called something as Liverpool players, and they they have done some activity as well in this particular one. And so I can then go on and do that, see all the activity. And I will see particular information about the users themselves. What are they called? What department do they belong to? This is from Azure Active Directory, and then I will see the users that have opted in for a trial within the last 60 days. I have modified this so we can see something now because this is more than 60 days ago. So I can then make sure that those people will get a license before their opt-in, whether their trial expires. And the rest is basically particular artifact, and then historical about it. How many reports I have gotten by date. So I've got 66, and then I have got 3 new reports here and 1 new report that's this date, and then how much usage you have had over particular dates. And then I have a usage by hour of day. This can be very useful too if you want to see when are people active. and this can also help you with when you refresh data sets. So the data dashboards is the same, data sets is pretty much the same, workspace as well. On data flows, I don't want to spend time on those. Another thing you could get out of the REST API is the data set refreshes. So you can see in the REST API what data sets have been refreshed and how long time the refresh took, at what time did that happen. So for example here I have selected on demand instead of not scheduled, so just on demand refreshes, and then I can see, for example, that this particular data set it was a little slightly faster doing it at 3 o'clock than at 9 o'clock in the morning. And this is something that you will typically see, that you will have a data set that a bunch of data sets that are all refreshed at 8 a.m. or all refreshed at 7 a.m. or something, or midnight or something like that. And if you see a performance difference from one time to another, you can tell the people who are responsible for it that, hey, you probably should move your refresh because it's refreshed at the same time as a bunch of other things. If you can move it to an hour earlier or an hour later, then it might speed things up. So this is something you can get from the REST API. And then lastly I have just imports, which is basically the same thing. So this is how often reports have been published to the service. And this one, for example, here would show you how many of them are imports, how many of them are direct queries, how many of them are what's called live, not live, streaming, and so on and so forth. And then you have state if it's successful or failed, and then you have what type of data source is it? Is it an upload data source or is it a SharePoint? And then just imports by date. So this is a little bit about what you can do with the data. But of course here the limit is basically your imagination. So there's whatever you feel like you will need to know, you can put in here. But the main thing is here I have combined the activities with the inventory and with the user information from Azure Active Directory. You will be able to get all this information here. And as I said, what I don't have here is one of the things that I've been doing a lot lately, which I really like, is to have a proper inventory so people can browse reports by topic or something like that. And you can actually extend that, and I'm working on extending that to something to add more information, so to enrich the data as well. So hopefully we managed to get our objectives today, which were to tell you why you should be monitoring and what you should monitor, how you can monitor it, and how you can report on the data. I have in my slides, I have some links, so basically some links to different places where you can get different examples of it, and I also have some of the PowerShell code that I have have shown you, and things that I haven't shown you as well, and I will supply that to Mark so you can all go and download it if you're interested in looking at more at it. But otherwise than that, I am done. So Mark, do we have any questions?
Thank you very much for that. It was really good. I do have to confess, you ruined it when you start talking about Liverpool. So maybe that's something to consider next time. So yeah, well, let's get started. I mean, I think some of the questions we've got, you've kind of answered, but it might be worth just touching on those things again. First question from Sunal. He says, so how do you transfer a license if it's linked to an email ID? So a Power BI desktop license, I think he's referring to there.
Yeah, so the Power BI Pro license is simply, in the Office 365 admin center, you cannot do that as a Power BI admin. You will need to be an Office 365 admin. You can go in there and you can, simply remove it from a person and put it onto another one. It's very simple to do, and they can do it, pretty much whenever they like.
Cool. So you showed us the Power BI admin portal. I got the impression that the experience there was pretty much the same, albeit with a few differences between Service and Power BI Premium. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the experience is the same. The only thing you will, if you have Power BI Premium, it will look exactly the same, but they will be populated. The capacity part will be populated. Otherwise, it's exactly the same.
Okay, so the premium one, that does show the premium node capacity, doesn't it? Or does it?
Yeah. So if you have Power BI Premium, you will have the in the, let me just go to it, here. So, oh, that was not the right one. Sorry, here. So if you go to the admin portal, and if you have capacities, you will have the settings here, and you will be able to, assign capacities, and you will be able to see who is capacity admins. You can sign admins and all these different things, So you will be able to see those here.
Okay, cool. So this question came in quite early, and I think you went on to talk about this, but we'll ask you anyway. So you said in the admin portal section that settings change state aren't logged, only that the event happened, and then you talked about manually sort of making a note or a record of those settings. And so the question really is that I'm guessing that documentation of these things could be a good use case for PowerShell and the Power BI REST API. So I guess the answer is yes to that.
Nope, the answer is no. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the API that would allow you to pick up the information here. So you will simply need to go in, and you will need to manually go in and write these things down. So create workspace is enabled for all the entire organization. This is simply manual typing. There's nothing, you cannot harvest this in any way.
Okay.
And the audit log will tell you that what it changed to. So it's not entirely useless. It will tell you that if I turn this off, it will tell me that create workspaces was turned off, which of course is very simple. I know then that it was turned on before, but I don't know if it was turned on and applied to specific groups or an entire organization or whatever. So I don't know the state it used to be in.
We've just had a question come in from Kurti. I don't know quite which context of what we've just been discussing this is for, but he or she says that is this the same for personal gateway? I'm not too sure what with reference of that is.
So the gateways, you can get information about the gateways from the REST API. So what gateways exist, who is the owner of them, and then some of the settings of them, and it will work for personal gateways as well.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, I've had experience with the Azure DevOps REST API, and I think you've kind of alluded to this yourself, that it's not necessarily a straightforward, it's not straightforward querying the REST APIs. I mean, is there any community projects out there that make reporting of these metrics slightly easier, almost like a point and click thing?
Yeah, well, not that I am aware of. There are quite a few good write-ups of how you can do this.
Okay.
So Melissa Coates has been writing something of it. Mark Lylwild, he has been doing it as well. So there are quite a few blogs, but there's no point and click, like install something. Although I wouldn't be surprised if someone will create that soon. Of course, the Power Sentinel from Alex Vittles and his company, that does quite a bit of it, but not not the whole thing. So there are some few products out there you can buy, but I'm not sure there's any of them does the whole inventory stuff.
Okay, cool. And for the sake of the recording, I think Alex Whittles's company is Purple Frog, isn't it? So
yes, yeah. Thank you.
Power BI Sentinel. Right. So you used in your presentation various Power BI commandlets in PowerShell. Where exactly did those commandlets come from? Is there a specific module you need?
Yeah, so it's called Power BI Admin. Let me just ping that. So it's Power BI PowerShell commandlets. So it's basically that you will have one commandlet that you can so the one called Microsoft Power BI Management. If you install that, you will get everything. Otherwise, you can go and get individual one if you just want some parts of it.
Excellent.
You see that it will not cover the whole REST API. As you can see, there's only part of it. It only covers part of the management part of it.
Okay, cool.
But it's really, really good,
Yeah, it does look good. Next question, along the similar lines, so we're still talking about REST API here. So you use the invoke Power BI REST method. I didn't actually see you use a personal access token. In fact, you did explain that you were already authenticated. Is it possible to generate a personal access token and access Power BI that way through PowerShell?
Yeah, there is a simple commandlet that's that is called login Power BI, something like that.
Okay.
And it will just simply prompt you, and then you can, then you can log in, and then it will just, then you have a session token that you can work with during that session. It actually lasts quite long, few hours actually.
So in terms of your functions that you're using, how are they authenticating?
Yeah, they are authenticating using a so I'm using secret key vault.
Okay.
So they're simply getting from the key vault to the, but it's basically a similar. It's the same way of authenticating. It's just getting this So there is just getting credentials and then connect Power BI service account, which is the command let's called, and then I've just created credentials using the other ones.
Perfect. Okay. This question comes from me, and given what you said at the end, I'm guessing the answer is going to be SQL Server. So have you any preferences, or SQL database, have you any preferences to where you save all your data that you collect for login? And the reason I'm asking that question really is that whilst you are kind of churning through the data and storing it in relational, I do wonder and have wondered about these kind of solutions, whether it's better just to store into a Cosmos DB SQL API and store natively as JSON.
Yeah, so I do store all the JSON files, in blob storage. The reason why I take it from there into a SQL is that every BI tool in the world knows SQL, and it's just so easy to connect to. It is using relational is so easy, but it's no reason if you prefer to put the JSON into a storage that can handle that. To do that, but it's just makes my life easier. And other Power BI, is really I could connect Power BI directly onto the JSON files. It has no problems with that. But I would just if I put it into a database, it allows me to do whatever I want after that.
Fantastic. Okay, got a question from Bill Walter. Big shout out to him because he's been very patient with his question. He asked a question. I'm going to paraphrase it because I think he's really asking about pulling off the logs. I think he's wanting to be able to pull real-time data off, and from what he said, his opinion is, I believe, that all we're really getting and all we can get is historical data. So is there a way to get any real-time metrics from Power BI?
No, there's nothing really like that because everything it's in the audit log is actually lagged by. Well, I think at least 15 minutes, but I think it's even more than that. I did a test, a couple of weeks ago, and it probably took around an hour for it to show up. But I didn't try it all the time, so I just went in regularly to do it. So there's no way for you to do any kind of real-time monitoring of the audit log. Not that I'm aware of, at least.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
And I was just in the compliance center pressing, the show me. So I was not using the API,
So the answer then is to employ somebody a minimum rate just to keep pressing the button. Then I guess.
Well, if you use the API, you can of course automate it. But I was just want to do it, eliminate that as a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Excellent. So final question. I think I can even answer this. So let's try something special here. Let me attempt the answer to this. So the question from Sanal is, I am a Power BI admin but don't have access to Office 365 audit logs. How can I get this data? So my answer is you can't. So I don't know if you want to let me know if I'm correct or not.
Well, you're not correct. Quite.
Oh. That's why you're the expert here.
Because the audit log actually the 30 days of the audit logs are stored within the Power BI admin center. So as a Power BI admin, you will be able to use this REST API endpoint, and you will be able to get the last 30 days. Within the Office, you will be able to get 90 days. So this is a fairly newish thing that they added because there was a lot of no Power BI admin could get access to the Office 365 security and compliance center. So they added this, and for some reason they only decided to put 30 days in there. I don't know why.
Okay. All right, that's fantastic. All right, so I think that wraps up the presentation. I really appreciate you joining us at such short notice. What people won't realise is you only had 2 days to prepare for this, so I really appreciate you being able to do it. It's been really interesting for me, and I've learned an absolute ton of stuff that I'm going to put to the test. So thanks for joining us, Ásgeir.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you very much to everyone who's attended. Thank you, Ásgeir, and hope to see you all soon.
Bye-bye.